Making headlines for this week of February 20th. Strategy or surrender. Late-breaking deal sure to cause confusion and anger, but on which side? The illusion of terror. Sources and leaders start speaking out on the nature of alleged international terror groups ISIS and Boko Haram. Disclosure on the agenda. Podesta makes international waves, tweeting his failure to obtain UFO files. And spies in your computer. Russian company exposes NSA links to hard-coded spyware loaded onto laptops worldwide.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. 新年快乐, or 过年好, to my Chinese listeners, or those celebrating or observing the Chinese New Year as well. Gong Shi Fa Cai, happiness and prosperity in this year. In a late development, just before going to air, the London Guardian was reporting on the 20th that Greece has stepped back from the prospect of a disorderly Eurozone exit on Friday night after reaching a last-ditch deal to resolve the impasse over its €240 billion bailout. The outline agreement between Athens and its creditors in the single currency bloc to extend Greece's rescue loans should help ease concerns that it was heading for the exit door from the euro. In return, the country's left-wing government has pledged not to roll back austerity measures attached to the rescue and must submit before the end of Monday a list of reforms that it plans to make. The chairman of the Eurozone Finance Chiefs Group, Joran Dijsselbloem, said Athens had given its unequivocal commitment to honor their financial obligations to creditors. He said that the agreement was a first step in this process of rebuilding trust between Greece and its Eurozone partners, which would provide a strategy to get the country back on track. However, the Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis sounded a note of caution, saying this is not a moment for jubilation. This agreement is a small step in the right direction. He described the deadlines demanded of Greece and its newly installed government as inhuman and spoke of the need to respect the Greek electorate's will. The Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras will almost certainly face fierce reaction over the deal, both from hardliners in his radical left Syriza party and from the populist right-wing PANEL, his junior partner in the governing coalition, for agreeing to continue with austerity measures as part of the deal, given that he was elected on an anti-austerity program. The article goes on to add that the accord sets Greece a deadline of Monday to send a letter to the 19-nation group listing all the policy measures it plans to take during the remainder of the bailout period to ensure they comply with the conditions and receive vital funds. Without a deal, Greece faced the prospect of quickly running out of cash because it is effectively locked out of the international lending markets. Its banking system, on life support from the European Central Bank, is losing deposits at a rate of about $2 billion a week. A $1 billion shortfall in revenues for January, caused by some Greeks delaying tax payments in the run-up to the election, has added to the strain on government finances. So the question that remains to be seen now is whether the Greek Prime Minister and his finance minister have done the right thing, and at this moment that appears to be questionable, or whether they have surrendered all that they campaigned on and caved in to cabal-controlled interests under threat, or under the realization that the Greek people were emptying their bank accounts in anticipation of an exit from the EU. At a press conference earlier in the week, Varoufakis, the finance minister, described a bit about the process and what was at stake for Greece. As Varoufakis says, these bailouts are the problem and are not the solution.
I'm pleased to report that the negotiations were conducted during the Eurogroup meeting in a collegial spirit, clearly revealing and underlining the unity of purpose that we all had in that room. The purpose being to establish common ground over the next 4 to 6 months so as to reach a meaningful, a sustainable new long-term contract a contract for growth and development between Greece and Europe and with the IMF. Moreover, I have no doubt that these negotiations and discussions will continue, as the President of the Eurogroup indicated, tomorrow, the day after, and I have no doubt that there is going to be an agreement in the end, an agreement that will be therapeutic for Greece and good for Europe. Now, you may very well ask me, and I'm sure you will, that if it is so, why have we not managed to agree on a communique today, like we didn't agree on a communique last Wednesday? Why didn't we manage to conjure up a simple phrase that will unlock immediately this period of deliberation between us and our partners and the institutions? The real reason concerns a substantial disagreement on whether the task ahead is to complete a program which this government was elected to challenge the logic of, or to sit down with our partners with an open mind and rethink this program from scratch, a program which, in our estimation, and I believe in the estimation of most clear-thinking people, has failed to stabilize Greece, has generated a major humanitarian crisis, and has made reforming Greece, which is absolutely essential, ever so hard. Now remember, a debt deflationary spiral like the one that we have been experiencing in Greece for 7 years almost now does not lend itself to successful reforms, at least not to the reforms that Greece needs in order to stop being dependent on loans from its partners and from the institutions. Indeed, that Greece needs in order to address the real needs of its people, the humanitarian crisis, and the need for investment-led recovery. Now, last Wednesday, in the previous Eurogroup meeting, our side, the Greek administration, turned down a pressing demand to subscribe, and I shall mention the words here, to the notion of extending and successfully concluding the current program. We rejected that. And we rejected it because we do not believe that it is a program that can be successfully completed. That is the very reason why we were elected, because we put to the Greek people the hypothesis, the proposition, that this program is part of the problem, not part of the solution. So it would be absolutely incongruous. It would be an act of subterfuge to promise to our partners that we're going to complete successfully a program that we had challenged the logic of. Now, as a result of that impasse last Wednesday, there was no communique. But, remarkably and very positively, on the following afternoon, Thursday, just before the European Union summit, Eurogroup President Dijsselbloem and Prime Minister Tsipras agreed on a joint communique that was exactly what was necessary in order to kickstart the technical discussions between our team and the team from the institutions. And the joint communique, if you recall, mentioned that the two sides would explore common ground between the current program and the plans of the new government for a new contract with Europe. That was a genuine breakthrough last Thursday. It followed an impasse on Wednesday night, as you recall. Now, this afternoon, before the Eurogroup meeting, there was another breakthrough. Prior to the Eurogroup meeting, I met with Mr. Moscovici, whom I want to thank for his highly positive role in this process. Mr. Moscovici presented me with a draft communique that I was perfectly happy to sign there and then, as it was. It was a communique that recognized Greece's humanitarian crisis and spoke of an extension, or the need for the Greek government to apply for an extension of the current loan agreement, and that this would take the form of or lead to a 4-month intermediate program as a transitional stage to a new contract for growth for Greece. that will be deliberated and concluded during that 4-month period. The communique that was the draft communique that I saw also stated that the European Commission would provide the technical assistance to Greece during this period to strengthen and accelerate the implementation of our reforms. On the basis of this understanding between us and the Commission, we were more than happy, and we remain more than happy, to apply for the loan agreement to be extended. And beyond that, our side, the Greek government, was prepared in order to expedite the process and to make agreements faster, more efficient, and actually fairer. We are prepared to offer a number of conditionalities, which we thought our partners required for the purposes of building trust between our side and them. And this was something that I explained in the Eurogroup meeting in those very words, we reiterate our commitment to the terms of the loan agreement to all our creditors. We are prepared to take no action during the period of this interim agreement between now and, let's say, August. No action that threatens to derail the existing budget framework or any action that has, in the ECB's, the European Central Bank's estimation, implications for financial stability. Our only condition for doing this, that we required of the other side, was that we should not be asked to impose measures that are clearly recessionary and clearly uncalled for in the state of humanitarian crisis we have in Greece. For instance, no cuts in the low pensions, the lowest of the pensions, no VAT hikes during this period, especially in regions of Greece that in the beginning of the summer require all the assistance that they can get in order to boost tourism, a great earner, a great industry for the Greek economy. Unfortunately, that splendid document that I was prepared to sign there and then, without a second thought, was withdrawn minutes before the Eurogroup began by the Eurogroup's president. And it was replaced with another document that took us not just back to last Thursday, but indeed it took us back to last Wednesday. When, let me remind you, last Wednesday we were pressurized to sign up to an extension, not of the loan agreement, but of the program itself, the current program. Being offered, in exchange, as you heard Mr. Dijsselbloem say, the nebulous two-word phrase, some flexibility in that program. Now remember, our government was elected to challenge the philosophy of the program. We were not interested in some cosmetic changes. The idea some, not even flexibility, some flexibility, was highly problematic for us. We were very keen to have an agreement today, as we were last Wednesday. But when asked about what those two magic words, or nebulous words, as I said, some flexibility means, we didn't get a very precise answer. So for instance, would it mean that pensions, the lowest pensions will be cut by 10%, 5%? How much? What is the definition of flexibility? We were offering to refrain from effectively implementing our own program, the program that we were elected to implement for a period of 6 months, and all we were getting back was a nebulous promise of some flexibility that was never specified. Under those circumstances, ladies and gentlemen, it proved impossible for the Greek government, despite our infinite goodwill, to sign the offered communique.
In light of these late developments to this story, everything else that was originally prepared for this story has now become mostly irrelevant. CVN will be keeping an eye on this story, as the fallout could now become dramatic, either on Tsipras and Varoufakis for caving in, or if Tsipras and Varoufakis return on Monday and cancel the agreement with the banking cabal. Once again, we seem to be on the verge of something, but at this time we are no longer quite sure exactly what that is or what it will be. In other geopolitical news, in the midst of all that is going on right now, it is becoming increasingly harder to know who exactly is reporting information as factual and those who are not. Observe that I did not use the word truth. Longtime CVN listeners will know that this word truth is relative to each individual in any moment of now. There is also a question of whether or not factual information is being given a particular slant so that it is interpreted in a different way. Statistics presented by the media are notorious for using this strategy. I have recently been given some information by Veterans Today senior editor Gordon Duff that has now given me reason to question a few sources that I have been using recently on this newscast. I'm still trying to make sense of this information, so it is not appropriate for me to name names at this time, or perhaps even ever. Both Duff and I, however, are very much in agreement, however, with recent revelations Duff has made about Alex Jones and his program. I must confess, it bothers me each time I realize that a source that I felt may have been giving good information is revealed to be a possible disinfo agent. They seem to be so very good at putting out truthful or factual information, and this is part of the trick, to put out tidbits of truthful or factual information here and there, and then when the time is right, throw out something that everyone will eat up because they have come to trust that particular source. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you do not trust everything I report just because I am reporting it. I am drawn to certain sources, and there are times when sources I have trusted suddenly present something that I do not agree with, and so I choose not to report that information on a newscast. It is here where I try to use my discernment in the information as opposed to the source. When listening to this newscast, try your best to go with the message and not necessarily with the source. The source may occasionally make mistakes. I make mistakes. If you listen to the message, however, please know that in that particular moment I may have chosen that source because the message felt right to share in that moment. A different message from the same source the next day may not have any relevance or meaning at all. Governments are playing the same game with us and with the media. The media will in turn play the same game with the general populations who still feel that the mainstream media is honest and morally and ethically sound. ISIS and perhaps now Boko Haram are only two examples of this. The media plays out different angles of stories relating to ISIS in different countries, perhaps to keep people confused about the true agenda of this group, assuming that it is really the same group being talked about in these different countries. An article on February 15th posted on the yournewswire.com website reported that former CIA contractor Stephen Kelly has said on record that ISIS, or ISIL, is a fabricated terrorist group made and funded by the CIA in the United States.
With respect to the issue of the United States taking military action against ISIS or ISIL or IL, whatever they are calling this organization right now, my response to the people that have been asking me about this is that if you want to get to the root of the problem and remove this organization, the first thing they need to do is remove the funding and take care of the entities responsible for the creation of this group, and that would bring the forces here at home, because clearly this is entirely a farce. This is a completely fabricated enemy. The funding is completely from the United States and its allies, and for people to think that this enemy is something that needs to be attacked in Syria or Iraq is a farce, because obviously this is something that we created, that we control, and only now it has become convenient for us to attack this group as a legitimate enemy. And clearly when they say that they don't need permission to go into Syria and attack that country, one can only imagine how long it will be before they are dropping bombs on the home of Bashar Assad. So I think that this is a complete farce, and I think that the American public, I would like to believe that they are not completely ignorant of the source of this, but obviously these tactics that they are using with the executions, the videotaped executions or alleged executions, are designed to create massive amounts of fear and cause a response here at home, or a knee-jerk reaction, if you will, to authorize more spending and more bloodshed and more warfare. But again, this is not to change the subject, but this is almost like Ebola, which everyone is also getting upset about, and we know that this has been patented by the U.S. government, and this is just another terror weapon. So I believe that this ISIS group would probably go away and would be easily defeated by the armies of Bashar Assad, perhaps, if they were left alone to their own ways and their own sources of funding. I am very disappointed that so many people think that this is an attractive group to join, but I suspect that there are people who are disillusioned with the current power structure of the world, and they think that this may be an effective way of making big changes in the world. But ultimately, I believe that this terror organization is a complete fabrication, and that the true source of the problem is probably ultimately going to rest within our own government, or perhaps even banking cabals and Rothschilds and the usual sources for all of this sort of thing.
This claim now appears to be supported by at least two world leaders publicly. An RT article on February 19th has reported that Western states are trumpeting ISIS as the latest threat to civilization, claiming total commitment to their defeat and using the group's conquests in Syria and Iraq as a pretext for deepening their own military involvement in the Middle East. Yet, as Libya seems to be following the same path as Syria, of moderate anti-government militias backed by the West paving the way for ISIS takeover, Britain and the U.S. seem reluctant to confront them there, immediately pouring cold water on Egyptian President Sisi's request for an international coalition to halt their advances. By making the suggestion and having it predictably spurned, Sisi is making clear Western duplicity over ISIS and the true nature of NATO policy in Libya. We have a little bit more now from RT.
I suspect what Egypt's doing is actually calling the West bluff to a certain extent. The West is using ISIS as a kind of pretext to step up involvement, direct involvement in Iraq and Syria after its original plans in August 2013 were scuppered. But the truth is, I don't think it wants to intervene in Libya. The whole purpose of the NATO intervention, in my view, was to create the kind of situation that it has created and that it was predictably going to create, and was predicted widely by myself and others and Gaddafi and former UK ambassador to Libya, that it would become a failed state and a breeding ground for terrorist militias from all over the region to come and set up training camps and loot the Libyan state arsenal, which is exactly what's happened. And this is kind of suits the interests of NATO because it's destabilizing the whole region, and they're quite happy to see destabilized countries rather than independent powers that can challenge their hegemony. So I don't think that they're particularly keen to back Egypt's cause, and I think Sisi is actually calling their bluff here to a certain extent. They're not really concerned about the fate of the countries that they devastate. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. All they needed to do is look at what had happened to the last three countries that they'd done humanitarian interventions in. Kosovo has pretty much become a failed state. It's a kind of main transit for heroin and sex slaves into Europe under the leadership of the forces they back, the Kosovan Liberation Army. Afghanistan, Iraq are effectively failed states. So, you know, it's the definition of madness, isn't it, to keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And yet they did the same thing, and lo and behold, they got the same result.
Another leader speaking out is the president of Sudan. In an article on London's independent.co.uk website on February 17th, the article wrote that Sudan's president has claimed the CIA, America's intelligence agency, and Israel's Mossad as being behind the Islamist militant groups Boko Haram and ISIS. Omar al-Bashir, used an interview with Euronews to claim there was a connection between the American and Israeli intelligence organizations and both extremist groups. He spoke after ISIS released a video purporting to show the beheading of 21 Coptic Christians in Libya, an act that prompted Egypt to respond with airstrikes avenging the massacre. The following is a short clip of the Euronews interview from the independent news website.
The President of Sudan has warned that the fight against jihadist extremism must engage militants on an ideological level and not solely concentrate on military action against them. Omar al-Bashir warned that simply using violence against young radicals who fight with organizations like ISIL and Al-Qaeda could lead to even more extremism.
Our policy has been largely successful. After we arrest these young people, we bring a group of young scholars to engage in dialogue with them about their thoughts. And we succeed in bringing a lot of them back from their radical ideas.
He says the CIA and Mossad are behind Boko Haram and ISIL. He was speaking exclusively to Euronews in the week that ISIL released a video purporting to show the execution of 21 Egyptians.
I said CIA and the Mossad stand behind these organizations. There is no Muslim who would carry out such acts.
A link to the extended interview given by the Sudanese president will appear in the show summary. This article notes a bit more from the extended interview with the president. The article writes that the wide-ranging discussion also saw the president challenge a report by Human Rights Watch claiming more than 200 women and girls were raped by Sudanese troops in an assault on the North Darfur town of Tabit, which the group said happened on October 30th. He dismissed the report as a radio news item from Radio Dabanga, which is hostile to us, and opposition-run and Israeli-funded, Euronews reports. If we use this story as an example, the questions come down to this. Do you feel in your heart that ISIS and Boko Haram really are legitimate groups causing terror to further their own private radical agenda? Or do you feel that these groups are set up, financed and run by government and Western interests to sustain a campaign of globalized terror in order to manufacture your consent to legislation and spending that profits a global group while systematically using the fear to strip away your rights and freedoms? If you do believe these groups are sponsored by Western interests, do you feel in your heart that these groups are linked to the U.S. and Israel? Once you can answer these questions with your heart, then your discernment will guide you in how to respond to whatever news reports you are hearing. Do not allow yourself to become confused with the rhetoric. Find the basic question to ask yourself that relates to a story and see how you feel about that basic question. Then begin following the path that will guide you to getting the information to validate that feeling as truth or not truth for you in that moment of now. Al-Qaeda has been exposed as being a CIA creation, and thus this is very likely why you never hear of this group anymore, or very little, despite all the statements made in years past about how dangerous this group allegedly was, or is. Another group took its place in the Middle East, and this is ISIS, which is in the process of being exposed through its ties to Israel and to the CIA. With all the various acts of terrorism being committed by governments and groups worldwide, why did the Western media jump all over one group in Africa named Boko Haram? While the Western media and the Western world have been very rarely interested in the plight of the African people, we are suddenly expected to believe that the Western media is compassionate to sudden acts committed by this particular group. If the Western media is selling you a story, your best first question to ask is this: why are they covering this story? Perhaps the next question would be, where's the money trail? We recently observed attempts made by the U.S. Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner, to circumvent what he considered potential interference from President Obama to deny Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu the opportunity to speak at the U.S. Congress in March, just ahead of an Israeli national election. Boehner wanted Netanyahu to sell his message to Congress that Iran is a threat to global peace with its intent to create nuclear energy. Obama has indicated his intention to veto any legislation seeking to impose further sanctions upon Iran. The Republican Party and the Israeli leader committed a major diplomatic faux pas that has now resulted in many Democrats who were previously sympathetic to Israel choosing to not attend the speech to be given by Netanyahu. Last week, CVN reported several Israeli sources as suggesting that their own leader should cancel or at least postpone the appearance. Given that Netanyahu may be nervous about the outcome of the election, this may be his last official opportunity to push his agenda on the U.S. puppets in Congress. This week, however, not to be outdone, President Obama has shot back with his own little slap in the face to the Israeli leader. At least two sources, RT and Veterans Today, carried a story on the 13th and 14th of February, respectively, revealing a classified report from the 1980s documenting U.S. involvement in helping Israel with hydrogen bomb technology. It seems that the government originally was going through a lawsuit to prevent this information from being made known, but suddenly, in light of the rapidly deteriorating relations with Israel, perhaps Obama thought it was time for this information to be made known. RT reported that conceding to a federal lawsuit, the U.S. government agreed to release a 1987 Defense Department report detailing U.S. assistance to Israel in its development of a hydrogen bomb, which skirted international standards. The 386-page report, Critical Technology Assessment in Israel and NATO Nations, likens top Israeli nuclear facilities to the Los Alamos and Oak Ridge National Laboratories that were key in the development of U.S. nuclear weaponry. Israelis are developing the kind of codes which will enable them to make hydrogen bombs, that is, codes which detail fission and fusion processes on a microscopic and macroscopic level, said the report, the release of which comes before Netanyahu's March 3rd speech in front of the U.S. Congress, in which he will oppose any deal that allows Iran's legal nuclear program to persist. Veterans Today, in their article, added that rumors abound that President Obama ordered the release of documents citing a 25-year cover-up by the U.S. that allowed Israel to conduct not only nuclear espionage and openly sell nuclear weapons technology, but be underwritten by $86 billion in illegal American aid in the process. The rumors state that upon receiving evidence of U.S. and Israeli complicity in the 9/11 attacks, both detailed satellite and signals intelligence supplied by order of Russian President Putin, Obama ordered the documents released. Only a week after Pravda published an extremely controversial story citing U.S. complicity along with unnamed proxies in staging the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. has released a bombshell. The U.S. has been sitting on a 1987 report, still heavily censored, citing Reagan-Bush complicity in passing on nuclear secrets to Israel, allowing their development of thermonuclear weapons. At the time of the report, VT editor Colonel James Hanke was ranking U.S. military officer in Israel and was tasked with gathering intelligence on Israel's nuclear program. Soon afterward, VT editor Jeff Smith, a nuclear weapons specialist and physicist, joined the IAEA and began investigations of nuclear proliferation activities on behalf of Israel and other nations, done in concert with AIPAC and Victor Bout's arms smuggling operations. Now, just prior to the highly controversial and politically charged visit to the U.S. by the Likud ruler of Israel, Netanyahu, the Obama Justice Department settles the lawsuit that was withholding key information, damaging not only to Israel, but that directly threatens U.S. aid to that nation as well. What this report basically highlights is that Israel's development of nuclear technology is illegal under international law, while Iran's is not. The article writes that Tehran's nuclear program is legal under the terms of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, to which Israel is one of the few United Nations members that is not a signatory. How this will impact the Israeli leader, either in his address to the U.S. Congress or in his election campaign, remains to be seen. I am feeling a somewhat urgent need to communicate something at this point, and it is my hope that you may choose to keep this in the back of your mind each time you feel called to share certain information via social media, but especially information about ISIS, Boko Haram, or even cabal-created events. For those of you who already know this, I apologize in advance. Have you considered why I do not give attention to ISIS or Boko Haram stories on this newscast, except to expose them as the false flag events that they are? My job gets more difficult when well-intentioned people continue to post and share fear-mongered stories that are designed to get people's emotions all wound up in a knot. The irony here is that my emotions get somewhat wound up into a knot by people who do not realize that by giving attention to the stories, they are also justifying the very reason for why ISIS or Boko Haram continue to do these alleged acts. Folks, I'm trying to say this with as much compassion and love as I can. If you are going to choose to share stories via Facebook or any other social media, have you truly reflected on the story you are about to share and what you may unintentionally be contributing to by sharing it? Sharing stories about ISIS or Boko Haram or about these alleged beheadings does nothing to help make the world better and only serves to prove to ISIS and its cabal handlers that its campaign of beheadings is still having an impact on people. I am asking you folks, please give greater thought and reflection to the potential consequences of sharing anything via social media. Is it a story that will truly help to awaken the masses, or is it contributing to fear? If you see someone who has posted a story like this, call them out on it. Post something politely and very gently, saying so that others can see the comments that this story does not help awaken humanity but only contributes to the fear. The person posting the story may be a paid shill, but hopefully the comments will awaken a few people in the process. This is what the new revolution looks like, folks. In financial news for this week, it is being reported on February 20th that the Russian Duma, the parliament, has now ratified the BRICS Bank initiative. The RT article reported that the Russian State Duma has ratified the 100 billion BRICS Bank that'll serve as a pool of money for infrastructure projects in Russia, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa, and challenge the dominance of the Western-led World Bank and IMF. The new development bank is expected to start fully functioning by the end of 2015, according to the Russian Finance Ministry. Russia has agreed to provide $2 billion from the federal budget for the bank over the next 7 years. It will have 3 tiers of corporate governance, with a board of governors, board of directors, and a president. This follows last year's announcement by China that will see the creation of a 21-country, 100 billion Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, to challenge the World Bank and Asian Development Bank. Headquartered in Beijing, former chairman of the China International Capital Corp Investment Bank, Jim Likun, is expected to take a leading role. The AIIB will initially be capitalized with $50 billion, most of it contributed by China. The country is planning to increase authorized capital to $100 billion. With that amount, the AIIB would be 2/3 the size of the $175 billion Asian Development Bank. India will be the second largest bank shareholder, though Kuwait, Qatar, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Nepal, Oman, and all the countries of the Association of the Southeast Asia, except Indonesia, are involved. Australia, Indonesia, and South Korea did not participate following U.S. claims of concerns about a rival to Western-dominated multilateral lenders. There will be some who see the creation of these new banks as being a threat to Western banking interests. There will be some who see the creation of these institutions as helping to facilitate the transition to a new global paradigm as the current system continues its implosion and transformation. Whatever your heart tells you in this moment is neither right nor wrong. It is what you need as truth for yourself, given your current worldview, and that is to be honored. Although we may not fully understand the bigger picture behind the unfolding events or the creation of the new global institutions, we can hold and anchor the energies that affirm that whatever is unfolding, they are all changes that will be as quick, as comfortable, as effective, and as safe as possible for the highest good of humanity and our planet. This week I would like to look at a story involving Ukraine that perfectly highlights how the global banking cabal uses its criminally corrupt banking system and fictitious bailout loans to negatively hurt the people of a country. A story on RT this week, dated the 18th of February, reports that Ukraine has agreed to increase the cost of gas to consumers by 280% and 66% for heating as part of the IMF terms for getting extra financial aid, says Valery Gontareva, the head of the National Bank of Ukraine. From now on, in accordance with our joint program with the IMF, the tariffs will see rather a sharp increase of 280% for gas and about 66% for heat, said Gontareva on Wednesday during the 11th Dragon Capital Investment Conference in Kiev. She added that as a result, inflation will be 25 to 26% by the end of 2015. The tariff rises are part of the amendments to the 2015 budget the government has had to introduce in order to receive an $8.5 billion loan from the IMF by the end of the year. Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk had warned of future price rises for gas and heating and stressed the IMF saved Ukraine from default, and now it's time to make moves which should eventually result in Ukraine's complete independence from Russian gas. The program will help Ukraine receive an additional $25 billion in financial aid, of which $17.5 billion will be provided to stabilize the financial situation in the country. Well, as we have seen from many other countries, this has not always been the case. In fact, it has never been the case. The article continues. The latest IMF program will replace the $17 billion package agreed in April of 2014. Ukraine has already received $4.5 billion under that agreement. Thus, the total IMF loans to Ukraine since the beginning of the crisis amount to $22 billion. Publicly, it is being stated that the goal is to get Ukraine off of Russian gas, and multiple lies have been created by Western power brokers, Western governments, and Western media to perpetuate the myth that has now enslaved the people of Ukraine. And here is what the people of Greece now know that the people of Ukraine are only now slowly beginning to discover. The global lending agencies put a few big numbers into a computer and ship that number, called a bailout loan, to corrupted leaders of countries in exchange for playing ball with the cabal, either willingly or under threat of some kind of retaliatory action. To pay for this fictitious loan, the price of gas and heating is being massively increased, which takes the real, hard-earned money by the middle and lower classes and is transferred back to this banking cabal, giving them resources to pay for mercenaries or whatever else is needed to preserve the illusion of their system of control, enslavement, and fear. The Greek people have now stated that they will not live in fear. The people of Iceland have stated they will not live in fear. The people of Ukraine are now finally starting to understand that they were screwed when offered the promise of joining the EU. Nothing has gotten better in their country, and in fact has only become infinitely worse as the people are realizing that they are being scapegoated in a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, as the U.S. tries desperately to prevent Russia from collapsing the U.S. dollar as global reserve currency and implementing competing loan institutions to the IMF and World Bank. In general news, one story is being looked at this week. A number of recent events in the Canadian geopolitical scene are suggesting that things may not be so well within Prime Minister Stephen Harper's world, and that his regime may be imploding. Last November, according to a Canadian press article, the union representing scientists and other professionals in the federal public service is abandoning its tradition of neutrality in elections to actively campaign against Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Members of the union have complained bitterly about what they claim is the muzzling of federal scientists and political interference with their work. About a week after that, the Canadian press reported via Global News on November 12th that a group of angry veterans who want the Harper government defeated in the next election is appealing to serving members of the military to join them in protest. Ron Clark, a member of the Canada Coalition for Veterans, who has been campaigning against the closure of Veterans Affairs offices, made the appeal on Parliament Hill at that time. It may put those in uniform in an awkward position, but Clark says they need a government that looks after its veterans. More recently now, on February 3rd, John Baird, the Foreign Affairs Minister for Stephen Harper, abruptly announced his resignation to take effect immediately. In a CBC article dated on the 3rd, Baird was quoted as saying that, "I was perhaps just a little naive, driven by ideology defined by partisanship at the age of 25, Baird began. I quickly learned, though, that to make a difference, to really make a difference, you can't be defined by partisanship nor by ideology. You need instead to be defined by your values." Arguments from both sides might question exactly what those values were, but given the fact that Baird has stepped down immediately and within an election year, suggests that something may be going on behind the scenes within Harper's party. One resignation, however, does not a story prove. On February 9th, Katie O'Malley, writing for the CBC, reported that, citing what she described as the mean-spirited leadership of the Conservative Party, Toronto area MP Eve Adams has left the Conservatives to join the Liberal Party. The article reported the leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, as saying that she wanted to be her community's voice in Ottawa, not the Prime Minister's voice in her community. Members of the PC had suggested recently that Adams had been barred from running in the next election campaign due to alleged misconduct, and yet, even up to the day of her resignation, she still maintained a role of parliamentary secretary, a position that has traditionally been regarded as a grooming position for people to rise in the ranks of the party and the government. Adams's fiancé, Dimitri Soudas, who, according to a City News article on February 9th, is long considered one of Stephen Harper's fiercest loyalists and an architect of the Tories' re-election strategy for 2015. He also was forced out of his position in 2014, accused of using his influence to support Adams's nomination for her political riding. Within hours of Adams crossing the floor, Soudas made it clear he's prepared to use his inside knowledge of the Conservatives against them. Then, on February 15th, Altia Raj, writing for the Huffington Post in Canada, reported that Prime Minister Stephen Harper's top spokesman, Jason MacDonald, is quitting and heading to the private sector. MacDonald was Harper's 8th communications director since the Tories came to office in 2006, and that leaves 8 months before the scheduled election coming up on October 19th. So 8 and a temporary 9th communication director since 2006 would seem to suggest that Harper does little to endear himself to those who would be his top spokesperson. That, or Harper himself pushes them out in a strategy of compartmentalizing his office so that each person cannot learn too much about what his overall agenda is. Harper himself does not seem to recognize that it is an election year. Either this, or he is realizing that the noose is tightening rapidly around the necks of those associated to the global Zionist agenda, and he is taking desperate steps that a leader might not normally take in an election year. When a campaigning leader would normally be trying to give out legislative candy to buy the votes of ignorant people who will be bought out, Harper seems to be recognizing that people are not taking the lollipops any longer, and thus a new strategy is required. Alessandro Bruno, writing for the geopoliticalmonitor.com website on February 9th, noted that Harper's bill, C-51, is a piece of legislation, quote, to give police more powers and modify the fundamental role of the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, CSIS, from intelligence gathering to be able to carry out arrests. In other words, Prime Minister Harper wants to give Canada more cops and more spies to give a semblance of tough talk for the consumption of voters in the 2015 election. Harper likes to say that Canada is at war, a condition that demands unapologetic firmness, but also one that will result in the creation of new crimes and new criminals. Bruno offers a brief overview of what this new legislation is meant to accomplish. Broadening the mandate of CSIS. CSIS is granted the mandate to disrupt threats to national security in Canada and abroad. Currently, its mandate is limited to the collection of information, and it must communicate with other agencies such as the RCMP. CSIS could now move itself to action in preventing potential movements, among other things, by intercepting weapons shipments or blocking communications inciting terrorism. This new power would be subject to judicial authorization. The criminalization of advocating or fomenting acts of terrorism. A maximum of 5 years is planned for these new offenses. The government says that these measures are aimed at discouraging more general terrorist acts, such as incitement to carry out attacks against Canada. Targeting terrorist propaganda. The current law allows for the seizure of hate material or child pornography. This measure would create 2 new mandates to prevent individuals or groups from encouraging the commission of terrorist acts. And finally, facilitating preventative arrests. The bill lowers required thresholds for recognizance with conditions and a commitment not to disturb public order by changing the terminology. In hearing this, my questions might be, 1. What is the definition of terrorism in this context? Who created this definition, and by whom was this definition given consent and acceptance? 2. When it is said, carry out attacks against Canada, is it the corporate entity that is being referenced in this case? 3. What is specifically meant by the term encouraging the commission of terrorist acts? Public groups are beginning to line up against Harper. The vets who fought, died, got injured, or suffered emotional trauma, perpetuating the lies of the global Zionist agenda, are beginning to wake up and align against him. People are starting to leave the party or defect to another party, and Harper continues to attempt to create legislation that will further enslave humanity. As well, coming up in about 1 month, the trial that many Canadians are waiting for is the trial of Canadian Senator Mike Duffy. Duffy was one of several senators accused of claiming questionable expenses and was caught up in a scandal involving the Prime Minister's office as well. Information suggests that Duffy was given payment by an individual from the Prime Minister's office, Nigel Wright, and Harper has denied any knowledge of the transaction. Duffy, however, has claimed that if he is going down, then he is taking others with him, and this appeared to be a very direct reference to Harper. This trial begins in April and runs until mid-June, a timing that could have very significant impact on a potential election campaign for Harper. Will Harper attempt to have Duffy silenced before the trial? This remains to be seen. Looking at disclosure news for the week, we start with what is arguably one of the bigger hints at disclosure to come from an official source in North America in a very long time. Yes, there have been many individuals and organizations working at various levels to share the information they have related to the existence of sentient intelligence and technologies of a non-Earth origin. This newscast refers to these civilizations as galactic families and recognizes that our galactic families, just like humanity on Earth, some exist with intentions of doing harm to other humans and the planet, while others exist with the intention of bringing life-honoring change, peace, health, and abundance for humanity and the planet. CVN has referenced a former Canadian politician, Paul Hellyer, who, as a former Minister of Defense, is still arguably the highest-ranking political official within a NATO-aligned country to openly admit to the existence of our galactic families. Information has been leaking out from countries around the world, although this information has not been adequately reported on by the mainstream Western media. This week came a bit of a bombshell from the U.S. Well, it is not exactly a bombshell because this man has stated his intentions previously, but what appears to be different now is the amount of attention his comments are receiving. Back in 2002, John Podesta made the following remarks at the National Press Club, and regular listeners will recall these remarks being aired back in mid-January on CVN.
I think it's time to open the books on questions that have remained in the dark, on the question of government investigations of UFOs. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law.
Back in 2013, the Huffington Post wrote that for all of you who hope the U.S. government will lift the veil on its alleged stockpile of evidence that Earth is being visited by extraterrestrials, take heart. This week, and again, this is the article from 2013, former Clinton Chief of Staff and UFO advocate John Podesta was named as President Obama's newest advisor. Podesta has more than once publicly urged the U.S. government to release any UFO files that could help scientists determine the real nature of this phenomenon. This week, coming back to 2015, as Podesta finishes up his working term for President Obama, he sent out a few tweets, some of his biggest regrets upon leaving the White House. It was his number one regret that is now getting the attention of many around the world. As posted on the presidentialufo.com website on February 14th, the tweet by Podesta read, "Finally, my biggest failure of 2014, once again not securing the disclosure of the UFO files." Grant Cameron, writing for Presidential UFO, suggests that Podesta has dropped an extraterrestrial bomb. The ripple effects will surely flow out into his new capacity, working as chief advisor to the anticipated Hillary Clinton 2016 presidential campaign. Cameron writes that this will make for interesting extraterrestrial politics, as Hillary was a key player during the Rockefeller Initiative from 1993 to 96, when billionaire Lawrence Rockefeller made a move to get the Clinton administration to make a public disclosure of the UFO situation. Hillary's role was, 1, to relay information between Rockefeller and Clinton's science advisor, and from the advisor to Rockefeller via the office of the First Lady, and 2, Hillary helped Rockefeller edit a letter on UFO disclosure to the president. A Business Insider article from January 15th had also covered Podesta's interest in UFOs as he began his work with the potential candidacy of Clinton. The ryot.org news website wrote on this and also linked it to the Clintons and also to the recent initiative by Stephen Bassett to get a petition signed calling for official congressional hearings on the subject of extraterrestrials. RYOT mentioned Bill Clinton's appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live back in April of 2014. Kimmel had asked Clinton if he had looked into the UFO issue. RYOT quoted Clinton's response. "Sort of," Clinton said. "First, I had people go and look at the records on Area 51 to make sure there was no alien down there." Kimmel then asked Clinton if he'd tell the public about aliens if they existed. "Yeah, I would," he said, later adding, "If we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised." RYOT goes on to note the response by Bassett to that appearance and how it compares to what Podesta has now done before joining Hillary's team. The article writes that, though he doesn't have concrete proof, Bassett said he believes Clinton brought up the UFO issue on Kimmel in response to rumors that more details from the Rockefeller Initiative and his alleged knowledge of it were about to go public. He thinks the same reasoning is behind Podesta's Twitter revelation, which came less than 3 days after Bassett sent a wave of information requests to members of Congress. "There's no way he can make that tweet while still serving in the White House," Bassett said. "This doesn't happen unless there is a very important reason. The best interpretation I can make is that Podesta and Bill Clinton have intellectually determined that the Rockefeller Initiative is about to come out. According to Bassett, this is a major upside, or there is a major upside to this. There's money to be made, political legacies to be created. This is a positive thing." We can only speculate on what has been going on behind the scenes at the White House during the last couple of years that may have prevented Podesta from succeeding in his goal to secure those files. Michael Salla, in an article on February 13th on the Examiner.com website, noted that back in 2008, Podesta was appointed co-chair to President Obama's transition team. Podesta's influence was most clearly displayed in the executive orders and presidential memoranda on Obama's first day of office on January 21st, 2009, promoting transparency and open government. Transparency and open government were signature issues for Podesta during his earlier time in the Clinton administration when he pushed aggressively for Executive Order EO 12958. EO 12958 prescribed a uniform system for classifying, safeguarding, and declassifying national security information that would reflect a greater commitment to open government. EO 12958 was viewed as an essential tool in ensuring the release of many national security files that had been unnecessarily classified for decades. An issue closely associated with Obama's Open Government Initiative was classified national security files concerning UFOs. The Clinton White House failed in a vigorous effort to gain access to and release such files, according to FOIA documents gained by Canadian UFO researcher Grant Cameron. The files document how both President Clinton and Hillary Clinton were involved in efforts to gain access to classified UFO files. Podesta rose to Chief of Staff in the Clinton administration and was a key figure in the Clinton UFO declassification initiative. This was Podesta's first failure to gain access to the classified UFO files. 2 days later, on the 15th, Salla wrote in another article, Podesta's admission came on his White House Twitter feed while he was discussing initiatives related to his official responsibility of overseeing climate change and energy policy for the White House. Did Podesta attempt to gain access to classified UFO files possessed by one or more government entities due to its relevance to his official duties? His admission suggests that UFO information has relevance to climate change and or energy policy. If so, does that mean that UFOs are indeed interplanetary spacecraft that use energy sources far more advanced than anything offered by the fossil fuel industry? If UFO information has relevance to energy policy, then why wasn't Podesta able to gain access despite having all the power of the White House behind him? What government entity can deny access to information requested by a senior advisor to a sitting president in the performance of his official duties? If a sitting president and his most senior advisors can't access UFO-related information relevant to policies being developed, then who is the real power behind the throne? Surely that's a question worth a serious investigation by the Fourth Estate. The media and those attempting to keep the information secret may be trying hard to do so, but there are some challenges to this, as too much information is now becoming public. 2 days after the second article, on the 17th, Sala wrote a third article, adding a bit more information, writing that after White House Counselor John Podesta went public on February 13th with his failed efforts to have classified UFO files disclosed, it has been learned that one of his unofficial sources for the existence of such files is Disclosure Project advocate Dr. Stephen Greer. Greer announced on February 14th that he had unofficially briefed Podesta about an extraterrestrial cover-up in early 2009, soon after Obama took office. Podesta, at the time, was in the process of completing his work as co-chair of Obama's presidential transition team. Greer's briefing documents were to be passed on to President Obama himself and then to his CIA director, Leon Panetta. A cover letter submitted by Greer for the briefing contained, among other things, reasons how presidential administrations have been systematically denied access to information concerning ET existence. The article quotes Greer as saying, "Because of this misguided secrecy, the wondrous new sciences related to advanced energy generation, propulsion, and transportation have been withheld from the people. These advances include the generation of limitless clean energy from the so-called zero-point energy field and quantum vacuum flux field from the space around us, and propulsion that has been termed, incorrectly, anti-gravity, the field of electromagnetic energy that is teeming all around us and which is embedded within the fabric of space-time, can easily run all of the energy needs of the Earth without pollution, oil, gas, coal, centralized utilities, or nuclear power." It is becoming more apparent that there are people within the U.S. government that have given themselves a higher security level clearance than even that of a sitting U.S. president. Regardless, the pressure is building, and it is getting harder and harder for individuals to keep this information from coming out in the mainstream in the near future. Will Obama be the disclosure president, or will it perhaps come from the next presidency? Links, including a copy of the presidential briefing letter submitted to Obama from Dr. Stephen Greer, will be found in the show summary. In tech news for the week, Russia appears to be on the initiative to expose and solve the problem of secretive spying being conducted by U.S. agencies and the NSA in particular. Kaspersky Lab, based out of Russia, has apparently uncovered online spy tools that have been installed on computers worldwide. With more on this story, we have this RT report.
Russian cybersecurity firm Kaspersky Lab has revealed that it found online spy tools allegedly connected with America's National Security Agency surveillance activities. We can get the details now from RT's Andrew Blake. He joins us from the US. Andrew, it is a complicated story, but in essence, what did the lab find?
Yeah, that's correct. So earlier today, Kaspersky came out with a statement, and they said that over the last around decade and a half, they've been monitoring among dozens of different groups, one that they're now calling the Equation Group. Now, that's an internal name given by Kaspersky in order to identify these actors in particular. Now, according to Kaspersky, the so-called Equation Group has been responsible for infecting upwards of tens of thousands of computers going back to at least 2001, perhaps as early as 1996. And they specifically targeted, through this group, computer networks in over 30 countries, including Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, and Mali. And according to Kaspersky, these malicious actors, participating in what they're calling the Equation Group, specifically targeted telecoms, energy sector, banking sector. And so what we're seeing here is a group of hackers, and we have not specifically put an attribution to them, but Kaspersky says there's a group of actors more sophisticated than what we've been seeing the past couple of years, and relying on a whole bunch of different implants, trojans, viruses, that when you take this state-of-the-art suite of tools and you put it together and you put them into the hands of this group, they're able to launch computer attacks that are unlike things that have previously been unreported. According to Kaspersky's report, the Equation Group was able to consistently override the firmware that keeps booting up every time a computer starts, and layer upon layer of decrypted partitions on top of these networks, so that once an implant can be targeting a specific system, it's practically impossible for it to be identified and to be fixed.
As we uncover more of these cyber espionage operations, we realize how little we understand about the true capabilities of these threat actors.
You say that it is difficult to attribute, who is actually responsible for these attacks, but many people are trying to link it with the NSA, aren't they?
Yeah, that is an argument that is going around right now. In fact, earlier today, Reuters spoke with a unnamed, I believe is a former analyst for the NSA, who did not dispute Kaspersky's findings. Another security researcher who goes by the pseudonym The Gruck, earlier today, he wrote on Twitter that if you go over the Kaspersky report and you look at some of the capabilities that these various implants, these various trojans are capable of delivering, it actually matches up perfectly with a lot of the abilities that are outlined in leaked NSA manuals. So while Kaspersky did not directly attribute this to the NSA, so far we're seeing that that correlation exists in more than just a couple of different ways. There's also similarities involving what the so-called Equation Group is capable of doing, and we're seeing similarities from what they're capable of doing and what the U.S. has already been attributed with doing, such as the Flame and Stuxnet viruses. Lots of similarities there, so one can't help but wonder that perhaps we have the same people involved in all these different sorts of cyber attacks.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks, Andrew. That's Andrew Blake for RT from the United States. Thank you.
An article on the Disclose.tv website on February 17th has noted that the infections started around 2001 but increased drastically in 2008, the year President Barack Obama was elected. Al Jazeera, in covering the story, added that the revelation by Kaspersky comes on the heels of last week's Silicon Valley standoff between tech executives and President Obama. The chief executives of Facebook, Google, and Yahoo declined a sit-down with Obama, reportedly to express their displeasure with some aspects of government surveillance and the administration's latest cybersecurity plan. The tech sector objects to the government's behavior in a couple of crucial areas: the intelligence community's fight against certain kinds of data encryption and/or their insistence on a pass key for government agencies, and the NSA's hoarding of so-called zero-day flaws, bugs that allow spies or hackers to access supposedly secure computer systems. Exploiting a zero-day flaw is one possible way in which the NSA gained access to hard drive source code. In the eyes of U.S. tech companies, continued revelations about the vulnerability of their systems, from the Snowden leaks through today's Kaspersky report, mean a direct assault not only on their integrity, but on their bottom line. Governments and foreign businesses alike have no interest in good old American know-how if it means good old Uncle Sam has access to their data and operating systems. In 2013, Brazil publicly discussed creating their own in-country internet in the wake of leaks about U.S. spying on Brazil's leaders. And just last month, China announced that companies selling computer equipment to Chinese banks would be required to turn over source code and submit to government security audits. CBS News had reported at least once, as far back as December 30th of 2013, that the NSA had spying capabilities on offline computers. This article reported that a well-known privacy advocate has given the public an unusually explicit peek into the intelligence world's toolbox, pulling back the curtain on the National Security Agency's arsenal of high-tech spy gear. Independent journalist and security expert Jacob Appelbaum told a hacker conference in Germany at that time that the NSA could turn iPhones into eavesdropping tools and use radar wave devices to harvest electronic information from computers even if they weren't online. Appelbaum told hundreds of computer experts gathered at Hamburg's Chaos Communications Conference, again at that time, that his revelations about the NSA's capabilities are even worse than your worst nightmares. Yet, that information was not picked up on at all by the media and other media, and it was left to quietly be buried. Armed with this information, people who are more technically inclined and who feel courageous enough to do so can begin to start asking politicians what's going on and whether or not they intend to start calling for changes that have removed the privacy, freedom, and consent from the people whom they were elected to represent. Information is power, and it is in how we use the information we gain to serve the highest good that has the potential to make all the difference in the world. In health news for the week, CVN has reported in the past many of the physical symptoms that are associated with the changes that we as a species are now going through. Different people have different terms for it, and each has its own element of truth attached to that word as it relates to the understanding that each individual brings to that word. It could very simply be called evolution. It could be called ascension. And in a very loosely interpreted way, even physical death is a form of change as we currently know it. For most of us, it is unclear exactly what is changing and why, but many, when asked, seem to feel it, sense it, and are perhaps experiencing it in ways that they cannot yet understand or explain to others. They are changes, however, that have profound impacts on different people on different levels. One article posted on the Examiner.com website back in 2012 addresses some of the more emotional issues that are attached to the changes we are experiencing at this time, and thus this is why I have been drawn to share this story at this time. The article, written by Cinnamon Crow, uses language that refers to ascension. If this word does not feel appropriate for you, try to picture the changes in a way that is meaningful to you and observe if you are experiencing anything that is being described here. Crow writes that as if the physical symptoms are not enough, there are emotional symptoms connected with ascension. While painful, this process is needed to clear out old, lower frequencies. Climbing the ascension ladder is impossible while weighted down with baggage. It must be released. Many call this process a dark night of the soul. Here are her 8 emotional symptoms for your reflection. 1. Old issues and painful memories begin to surface. When this occurs, immediately stop and acknowledge the memory. Feel the emotion attached and release it to the universe for transmutation. 2. Erratic emotions will manifest as extreme highs and lows. Many experience a roller coaster of emotions in a day. This is the body's way of releasing pent-up emotions. 3. Relationships change. As personal frequencies rise, many will find it difficult to spend long periods of time engaging with those emitting a lower vibration. Family, friends, and co-worker relationships that are no longer a vibrational match will become uncomfortable. Pull away without guilt when this begins. 4. Many suffer depression symptoms as a sense of loneliness sets in. 5. Ascension brings changes in life circumstances, divorce, changing jobs, moving into a different home, new friends, and limited family contact occur as vibrational differences become intolerable in the old spaces. These desires to change are the universe's way of removing that which no longer serves. 6. Skin eruptions, such as rashes, bumps, acne, hives, shingles, and staph manifest. This is the body's way of detoxing and is a sign of emotional issues coming to the surface to be released. 7. Chaos and confusion abound. Many complain of feeling out of sorts and overwhelmed, especially after life-changing circumstances with no idea how to get back on track. This is only a temporary symptom. Things will settle once the body becomes adjusted to the new frequencies. And 8. Feeling out of place is common. The old energies and spaces seem just as uncomfortable as the new. Lower vibrational places will continue to cause feelings of unease. However, once the body adjusts to the new higher frequencies, the new spaces will feel like home. I can tell you from my own personal experience that I have observed and felt a number of these issues within myself. Like each of you, I am not immune to what is going on around us and within us. We can only be as gentle as possible when we observe this within ourselves, and also try to offer compassion to others who recognize what is happening within themselves also. I would gently offer, however, that these symptoms are not an excuse to treat another badly, and when necessary and appropriate, one may have to speak one's truth to another who seeks to impose negative energies upon that one. As demonstrated by Greece, serve the collective whole when it is appropriate and honorable to do so, but do not sacrifice or surrender who you are either. One quick announcement for this week. As many have discovered, a few more technical improvements have been made on the Inlight Universal website that are now allowing people to download from iTunes the podcast from each broadcast. For those who use Stitcher, this now is also available. I'm going to stay optimistic that finally this week the show will air without any glitches, and that the proper buttons will appear on the website as they are supposed to do without any significant delay. CVN acknowledges the incredible work done on the website by Isaac and also by Inlight Universal founder Graham Douillet. Their efforts have helped us in being able to deliver a platform on our own terms with enhanced sound quality and the downloading options that users can now enjoy. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service and your commitment. And in this week's final words, in order to break the addiction that most humans still have to the current collapsing paradigm that is grounded in fear, debt, and separation, we as a species must begin to take the step to first acknowledge the life that we have consciously or unconsciously chosen to enslave ourselves to. Until we can acknowledge what we have created within the illusion of duality, we cannot move beyond it. I have come across a video that offers a very nice synopsis of the human condition and our responsibility in co-creating something better. Although I personally hold the perspective that the human journey is to know who we are through the experiences of being who we are not, I am trying to avoid calling our lives a lie, but rather more than an experience within the illusion of duality from which we have a choice to grow or to remain asleep and enslaved. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. This week's final words come from Spencer Cathcart, sharing his thoughts on the lie that we live.
At this moment, you could be anywhere, doing anything. Instead, you sit alone before a screen. So what's stopping us from doing what we want, being where we want to be? Each day we wake up in the same room and follow the same path to live the same day as yesterday. Yet at one time, each day was a new adventure. Along the way, something changed. Before, our days were timeless. Now our days are scheduled. Is this what it means to be grown up? To be free? But are we really free? Food, water, land, the very elements we need to survive are owned by corporations. There's no food for us on trees, no fresh water in streams, no land to build a home. If you try and take what the earth provides, you'll be locked away. So we obey their rules. We discover the world through a textbook. For years we sit and regurgitate what we're told, tested and graded, like subjects in a lab, raised not to make a difference in this world, raised to be no different. Smart enough to do our job, but not to question why we do it. So we work and work, left with no time to live the life we work for. Until a day comes when we are too old to do our job. It is here we're left to die. Our children take our place in the game. To us, our path is unique, but together we are nothing more than fuel. The fuel that powers the elite who hide behind the logos of corporations. This is their world, and their most valuable resource is not on the ground. It is us. We build their cities. We run their machines. We fight their wars. After all, money isn't what drives them. It's power. Money is simply the tool they use to control us. Worthless pieces of paper we depend on to feed us, move us, entertain us. They gave us money, and in return, we gave them the world. Where there are trees that cleaned our air, are now factories that poison it. Where there was water to drink, is toxic waste that stinks. Where animals ran free, are factory farms where they are born and slaughtered endlessly for our satisfaction. Over 1 billion people are starving, despite us having enough food for everybody. Where does it all go? 70% of the grain we grow is fed to the animals you eat for dinner. Why help the starving? You can't profit off them. We are like a plague sweeping the earth, tearing apart the very environment that allows us to live. We see everything as something to be sold, as an object to be owned. But what happens when we have polluted the last river, poisoned the last breath of air, have no oil for the trucks that bring us our food? When will we realize money can't be eaten, that it has no value? We aren't destroying the planet, we're destroying all life on it. Every year, thousands of species go extinct, and time is running out before we're next. If you live in America, there's a 41% chance you get cancer. Heart disease will kill 1 out of 3 Americans. We take prescription drugs to deal with these problems, but medical care is the 3rd leading cause of death, behind cancer and heart disease. We're told everything could be solved by throwing money at scientists so they can discover a pill to make our problems go away. But the drug companies and cancer societies rely on our suffering to make a profit. We think we're running for a cure, but really we're running away from the cause. Our body is a product of what we consume, and the food we eat is designed purely for profit. We fill ourselves with toxic chemicals, the bodies of animals infested with drugs and diseases. But we don't see this. The small group of corporations that own the media don't want us to. Surrounding us with a fantasy we're told is reality. It's funny to think humans once thought the Earth was the center of the universe. But then again, now we see ourselves as the center of the planet. We point to our technology and say we're the smartest. But do our computers, cars, and factories really illustrate how intelligent we are? Or do they show how lazy we've become? We put this civilized mask on, but when you strip that away, what are we? How quickly we forget only within the past 100 years that we allow women to vote, allow blacks to live as equals. We act as if we're all-knowing beings, yet there's much we fail to see. We walk down the street ignoring the little things, the eyes who stare, the stories they share, seeing everything as a background to me. Perhaps we fear we're not alone, that we're a part of a much bigger picture. But we fail to make the connection. We're okay killing pigs, cows, chickens, strangers from foreign lands. But not our neighbors, not our dogs or cats, those we have come to love and understand. We call other creatures stupid, yet we point to them to justify our actions. But does killing simply because we can, because we always have, make it right? Or does it show how little we've learned, that we continue to act out of primal aggression, rather than thought and compassion? One day, the sensation we call life will leave us. Our bodies will rot, our valuables recollected. Yesterday's actions all that remain. Death constantly surrounds us. Still, it seems so distant from our everyday reality. We live in a world on the verge of collapse. The wars of tomorrow will have no winners. For violence will never be the answer. It will destroy every possible solution. If we all look at our innermost desire, we will see our dreams are not so different. We share a common goal, happiness. We tear the world apart looking for joy, without ever looking within ourselves. Many of the happiest people are those who own the least. But are we really so happy with our iPhones, our big houses, our fancy cars? We've become disconnected, idolizing people we've never met, We witness the extraordinary on screens, but ordinary everywhere else. We wait for someone to bring change, without ever thinking of changing ourselves. Presidential elections might as well be a coin toss. It's two sides of the same coin. We choose which face we want, and the illusion of choice, of change is created. But the world remains the same. We fail to realize the politicians don't serve us. They serve those who fund them into power. We need leaders, not politicians. But in this world of followers, we have forgotten to lead ourselves. Stop waiting for change, and be the change you want to see. We didn't get to this point by sitting on our asses. The human race survived not because we are the fastest or the strongest, but because we work together. We have mastered the act of killing. Now let's master the joy of living. This isn't about saving the planet. The planet will be here, whether we are or not. Earth has been around for billions of years. Each of us will be lucky to last 80. We are a flash in time, but our impact is forever.
I often wish I lived in an age before computers, when we didn't have screens to distract us. But I realize there's one reason why this is the only time I want to be alive. Because here today we have an opportunity we never had before.
The internet gives us the power to share a message and unite millions around the world.
While we still can, we must use our screens to bring us closer together rather than farther apart.
For better or worse, our generation will determine the future of life on this planet. We can either continue to serve this system of destruction until no memory of our existence remains, or we can wake up, realize we aren't evolving upwards, but rather falling down. We just have screens in our faces so we don't see where we're heading. This present moment is what every step, every breath, and every death has led to. We are the faces of all who came before us. And now it is our turn. You can choose to carve your own path, or follow the road countless others have already taken. Life is not a movie. The script isn't already written. We are the writers. This is your story. Their story. Our story.
So that is the unfolding consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is a part of the Enlight Universal Group of programs. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary on the blog at cosmicvisionnews.com, on the CVN, Facebook, Scene, Face Uni, and LO pages, and also on YouTube, Google+, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that every time you love yourself enough to choose your highest path, you create a shimmer of light that dances across the universe in the most delightful way. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.